All right, let's dive into something kind of different today, huh? Music. We've all heard it, love it. But have you ever thought about it as, like, a weapon?
It's not the first thing that comes to mind, right? But yeah, music can definitely be used in ways that are, well, less than harmonious, let's say.
We found this article from Listverse. 10 times people tried to weaponize music. And it's got some pretty wild stories. It really makes you think about the power of music, how it can be used to influence and manipulate people.
Oh yeah, music taps into some deep psychological stuff. Emotions, behaviors, even physiological responses. We don't always realize how much music affects us.
So this first story, it's about Manuel Noriega, the dictator in Panama back in the 80s. Remember him?
Vaguely, yeah.
So he's holed up in this Vatican embassy, right? And the U.S. military wants him out.
Mm.
But instead of just storming the place, they decided to try something a little more creative. They blasted rock and heavy metal music at the embassy, nonstop.
Wow, really? Talk about
Co-
psychological warfare. What were they thinking?
Apparently, they knew Noriega hated rock music. So they figured, hey, let's just drive him crazy with it. And it worked. After days of this sonic assault, Noriega surrendered.
That's incredible. It's like a real life example of that aversion therapy thing, you know? You pair something someone hates with the situation you want them to avoid.
Exactly. And they used Guns N' Roses, Linda Ronstadt.
Oh, man, that's brutal. I bet they cranked it up too, huh?
Oh, I'm sure they did. Imagine being stuck inside with that blasting 24/7. It makes you think about the playlist, though. What else were they playing?
Probably some Metallica, some other heavy hitters. I'm sure they had a team of experts crafting the perfect playlist for maximum psychological impact. You know, stuff with a driving beat, distorted guitars, things that would really get under your skin.
It's crazy how music can be used like that,
Hmm.
exploiting someone's weaknesses to get what you want. It's kind of scary when you think about it.
Definitely makes you think twice about the power of music.
Speaking of power, let's go back in time a bit, way back, to ancient battlefields. Ever heard of war drums?
Oh, yeah, of course. Big, loud drums used to intimidate the enemy, right?
That's part of it, yeah. But it's more than just making a lot of noise. The ancient Chinese and the Mongols, they used drums in a really sophisticated way.
Really? Tell me more about that.
Well, it wasn't just random banging. The size of the drum, the materials they used, even the specific rhythms they played, it was all carefully chosen to create a specific psychological effect.
So they were like musical strategists.
Exactly. They understood the power of sound. Certain rhythms, especially those that mimic sounds from nature, like thunder or animal roars, would trigger these primal fear responses in the enemy.
Ah, I see. It's like tapping into our deepest instincts, those things we're hardwired to react to.
Right. And imagine hearing those sounds amplified by huge drums echoing across the battlefield. It would be terrifying. It's like a sonic weapon designed to break the enemy's spirit before the battle even begins.
Wow, that's pretty intense. And it makes you realize that this idea of using sound to manipulate emotions, it's not new at all. We've been doing it for centuries.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it hasn't gone away. In fact, there are some pretty disturbing modern examples of this kind of sonic warfare. We'll get into that after the break.
And we're back talking about the less harmonious side of music.
Right before the break, we were discussing sonic warfare, and, well, things are about to get a little darker.
Yeah, this next example is pretty heavy. It's about the use of music in, well, interrogations.
Yeah. Specifically, by the CIA, post 9/11. I mean, we've all heard stories, but this article really dives into the details. It's pretty disturbing.
I can imagine. Using music as a form of torture, that's just dot wrong.
It is. And they didn't just use, like, harsh noise or anything. They'd blast heavy metal, yeah,
Mm.
but also things like children's songs, even white noise, for hours on end.
Wait, children's songs? How does that even work as torture?
That's the messed up part. It's all about messing with your mind. You hear something familiar, something comforting, but it's played so loud, so distorted, it becomes this agonizing thing.
I see. It's like twisting something good into something. God evil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And often they'd combine this with sleep deprivation, sensory overload, all sorts of stuff.
The psychological effects must be devastating. It's not just about physical pain, it's about breaking someone down mentally.
Right. And they used like Metallica's Enter Sandman, even the Barney theme song.
Barney, seriously.
Yeah, it's messed up. And it really raises questions about what constitutes torture, you know? Where's the line?
Definitely. It's a slippery slope.
Absolutely. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. We've talked about modern warfare. Let's go back to some ancient stuff, specifically Vietnam.
Ah, yes, the Vietnam War. Lots of psychological tactics used there.
Right. Have you ever heard of the Wandering Soul campaign?
Rings a bell, but refresh my memory.
So the U.S. military, they knew about Vietnamese beliefs about spirits and the afterlife.
Right, very respectful of their ancestors, those traditions.
Exactly. So they create these recordings, right? Sounds of like ghostly wails, cries, Vietnamese voices calling out, begging their comrades to go home.
Wow, that's creepy.
Right. And they blast these recordings at night in the jungle.
Oh man, I bet that was effective. Talk about playing on people's fears.
It was. The Vietnamese soldiers, they believed these were the voices of their fallen comrades, unable to rest. And it messed with them big time.
It's a perfect example of how cultural understanding can be weaponized, you
Yeah.
know? It's not just about the sound itself, it's about what that sound means to the people hearing it.
Right. It's about exploiting those deep-seated beliefs and fears.
Speaking of exploiting beliefs, we can't forget the Nazis. They used music in some pretty awful ways, too, especially in concentration camps.
Oh, yeah, that's a chilling chapter in history. They'd force Jewish prisoners to play in orchestras, as others marched to their deaths.
It's so twisted. The juxtaposition of beautiful music with such horrific acts, it's just mind-boggling.
They played specific pieces, too, like Schubert's Ave Maria at Auschwitz.
Using something so inherently peaceful, so spiritual, to mask the horrors happening around them. It's chilling.
It was all about control, you know, using music to enforce order, to create this sense of normalcy in the midst of absolute chaos and brutality.
And of course, the psychological impact on the prisoners, both those playing the music and those hearing it, must have been immense.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder of how something as powerful as music can be used for both good and evil.
And how even in the darkest of times, music can be used to manipulate and control.
Okay, let's move on to something a bit less heavy, shall we? We've talked about drums, haunting voices, even classical music. How about bagpipes?
Bagpipes, not exactly what you'd think of as a weapon of war.
Right, but you'd be surprised. Especially in Scotland, the bagpipes have a long history on the battlefield.
Really? What did they use them for?
Well, the sound, it's so piercing, so distinct, it could cut through the noise of battle. It was used to signal charges, to communicate orders, even just to boost the morale of the troops.
I bet it was intimidating, too, for the enemy.
Oh, absolutely. Hearing that sound coming at you, knowing those fierce Scottish warriors were on their way, it would be terrifying. And in World War I, there are stories of pipers leading their regiments into battle right there on the front lines.
Wow, that's incredible. Putting themselves in so much danger just to inspire their comrades.
Right. There's this one story about Piper Daniel Laidlaw at the Battle of Loos. He played his bagpipes during a charge, even after being wounded, and it helped his regiment capture a German trench.
That's amazing. Talk about bravery.
Right. And it really shows how music can be more than just entertainment. It can be a source of strength, a rallying cry, even in the most dire of circumstances.
It's a powerful reminder of the emotional impact music can have, even in the midst of war.
Okay, now for our last stop on this sonic journey. We're going back to ancient Mesoamerica. Ever heard of the Aztec death whistle?
Oh yeah, that's the one that sounds like a human scream, right?
That's the one. It's pretty unsettling, to say the least. And they didn't just use it for ceremonies, they used it in battle, too.
I can only imagine how terrifying that must have been. A whole army charging at you with these things shrieking in your ears.
It would be enough to make anyone turn and run. It's a prime example of psychological warfare, using sound to instill fear and break the enemy's spirit.
The Aztecs clearly understood the power of sound. It wasn't just about physical force, it was about attacking the mind, creating this sense of overwhelming dread.
Right. And the death whistle, with its eerie, almost otherworldly sound, it was the perfect tool for that.
It makes you wonder what other sonic weapons might be out there, things we haven't even discovered yet.
Yeah, it's a bit unsettling to think about, isn't it?
Definitely. But it also makes you appreciate the power of music and sound in general in a whole new way.
Absolutely. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the weaponization of music.
From ancient war drums to modern interrogation tactics, we've seen how something as beautiful and powerful as music can be twisted and used for less than noble purposes.
It's a sobering reminder that music, like any form of communication, can be used for both good and evil.
It all comes down to intent, and it's up to us to be aware of the power of music and to use it responsibly.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it as fascinating and perhaps as unsettling as we did. Until next time, keep those ears open and those minds sharp. That Aztec death whistle, it really makes you wonder, where's the line between music and just, like, noise? especially when it's used to freak people out.
It's true. It kind of messes with our idea of what music is supposed to be, right? We think of beautiful melodies, harmonies, not screaming whistles of doom.
But it's still sound, right? And it still has this incredible power to affect us, to get under our skin, even if it's not what we normally call music.
Absolutely. Like at its core, music is just organized sound. And how we organize it, what we do with it, that's where things get interesting and sometimes scary.
It's like we've seen how music can inspire, soothe, bring people together.
Oh.
But then there's this whole other side where it's used to, like, manipulate, control, even torture.
Right. And it all comes down to intent, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A drum beat can be exciting at a party, but terrifying on a battlefield. It's all about context.
And the death whistle, man, that thing is all about context. I mean, imagine hearing that in a dark jungle, not knowing what it was.
Ugh, I'd be running for the hills. But it's a good reminder, I guess. Music, sound, it's powerful stuff. We got to be careful how we use it.
For sure. It's not just about the notes or the rhythm, it's about the feelings it evokes, the way it messes with your head, even if you don't realize it.
Totally. It's like composers, musicians, they've known this forever. How to use sound to tell a story, to create an atmosphere, to make you feel a certain way.
It's like it's not just what you hear, it's how you hear it. You know, the same song can sound totally different depending on the volume, the instruments, the setting.
Right. It's all about the way it's used, the message behind it. And that message can be beautiful or it can be really messed up.
Makes you think twice about just hitting play on your playlist, doesn't it?
It does. It's like music is a tool, and any tool can be used for good or bad. It's up to us to decide how we use it.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. From Noriega and his rock music torture to ancient war drums and creepy ghost tapes. It's been a wild ride.
It has. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how powerful music, sound in general, really is. It's more than just entertainment. It's a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. It shapes our emotions, our beliefs, even how we experience the world around us. And it's been used for both incredible good and horrific evil throughout history.
So the next time you hear a song, take a moment to really listen. Think about what it's doing to you, how it's making you feel. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Great advice. Music is powerful, it's complex, and it deserves our respect. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of weaponized music. We hope you learned something new, maybe even a little unsettling, about the sounds that surround us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep listening, and stay curious.